Hello friends, welcome back to my channel SyntaxAdda. My name is Ravi, and in this video, we'll see how we can create an entity class. Before starting this, let's first understand what is entity class. In the previous videos, we already saw how we can set up a database, right? And how we can create a table. So here we created a table, right? And table was employee. We created an employee table, right? In the database. We had also created a database with the name dev user. And then we saw how we can set up the Spring Boot application, right? For our JPA and Hibernate. JPA and Hibernate. We saw how we can set up the Spring Boot application. Now, next is how we can map any object from this application or class, we can say class, to this database. So how we can do this, right? So any class which we are mapping to the database, that class, we call it entity class. So what is entity class? So entity class, we can say, is the class which correspond to a table into the database, right? And always the entity class will be annotated with @entity. So this is the very important condition. So if you want to show any class, which is the entity class, and that class is going to map to the database, so in that case, we must use @entity. Okay. So this is, this is the first condition, right? Second condition is that class must have public or protected default constructor. Default constructor. Always remember this. Okay. So default constructor, right? The constructor with no argument, right? The constructor with no argument. Just remember this. Okay. So that constructor must be either public or protected. You remember, right? What is this access modifier? These are the access modifier, right? Just I am taking little bit digression from here to just make you understand what is public and protected. Let's say we have a project, okay, and that project is having, let's say, package P1 and package P2. For the time being, I'm taking two packages, okay. So this is any project, let's say ABC. ABC is the project. In this package, we can have n number of class or interface, right? And then each class will have properties and behavior. Properties means fields and then methods, right? Same for interface as well. Okay. So now, if we declare, right, any constructor, just remember, if we declare any class, then its fields, its properties, right, or we can say its constructor or methods, right, or interface, then as a public, then in that case, these will be accessible across all the packages. So it will be accessible to package 1 and package 2 as well. When we talk about the protected access modifier, then in that case, let's say the protected we can use on field, methods, and constructor, not at class and interface level, right? So when we are using protected access modifier, in that case, the declared field, methods, or constructor will be accessible to that specific package where it is they are declared. Okay, it will not be accessible to different package. Just remember this one. So public access modifier means it will be accessible across different packages. Okay, so it is allowed here. But when we are using, protected access modifier, in that case, the accessibility will be provided across packages. Okay, but here the accessibility will not be provided across packages. So this will not be allowed. Remember this. So that's why, okay, now coming to the topic. So entity class, in entity class, we must have one public or protected default constructor. Why we am talking one default constructor is required? Because see, when object is being mapped to the database, it will always create an object, right, by using the default constructor. So let's dive into the coding part and we'll see. First, let's go through our database. Okay, and we'll see we have created a employee table, okay, with the employee ID, employee first name, employee last name, and email in dev database. So same way, in this database, I want to map an employee object. So how we can do this? Then later on, we'll see how we can perform the CRUD operations. So for the time being, first let's understand how we can map the Java object or any class, Java class, to the database. So we'll go to the our workspace. Here you can see, right? So this is our application, JPA Hibernate application, right? So here we'll create one class in the package. So I will give the name as entity, and then class name I will give employee. Okay. So under this package, com SyntaxAdda JPA Hibernate dot entity. So I created another package here. I am giving the name as employee. So first thing, so I want to map this class to the employee table. So we must tell here, and we need to annotate it with @entity. So you can see, right? So this is from the package Jakarta persistence. Okay. So we'll import this one. Now here we have the different, fields. So if you see here database, we have employee ID, employee first name, employee last name, email. Okay. So we'll first type in sub int, that's ID, private string first name, F name I'm giving as F name, private string I'm giving last name, L name. Okay. And then private string email. Okay. So first, if you see this ID, right? If you see here, the table name is employee. That's fine. But what all columns we have? We have the employee ID. But in the class level, we have ID, right? So we can give the column name as well here. So for that, we can write @column annotation. So this is also from Jakarta persistence. Okay. And we can give this name as emp ID. Why I gave this name? So see, in this database, the name is emp ID, right? So we have to map, we are mapping this column ID to the database column employee ID. And if the, let's say, if the name in this table is ID here, and here also ID, then this column will be optional. This annotation will be optional. So if you are not providing, then it will try to look for the same name as we defined it here. Okay. So it's always, suggested to provide this column name, so that in case, let's say in future, you are reflecting this employee, let's say this class, and you are changing this name. So if you changes this name to, some ID, to let's say ID something, then this will remain the same. So it will not impact your database, right? So always remember this one. So @column is an optional, but it is always, recommended to use the @column with some name, which is exact match with the database column name, right? The same name we can do with the @column, and we can type in name. And here, if you see, what's the name here? First name. So if you see employee first name, so same way we can write here first name. Okay. Then similarly, @column, right? Name, emp last name. Okay. So this is done. So we'll write name and then email. Okay. And then we should have one, as I said, we should have one public or protected default constructor, right? So we can type in public employee So this is our constructor. And there is one thing which is here, right? Entity always indicates this is your, this is corresponding to a table into the database. So if you want to give the name of this table, right? This employee table. So if you see here, here we have the name as employee. Table name is employee. So that's why you see here, this is employee. So it will map. But what if you want to give this, later on you are reflecting it with the employee detail, and you want to map to the same table, right? Employee table, then this will give the error, right? So if you want to give the same name as database table name, so you can use @table. This is the annotation. This is also from Jakarta persistence, right? So if you see here, so this is again the optional to give a name to the entity. Okay. So here you can give the name as employee. Okay. And then in the last, we can create getter and setter. So just right click here, go to generate, and then here getter and setter, just select all fields and then click OK. Okay. So this is your entity class, right? So what is entity class? So entity class is the class which is corresponding to a table of a database. We must annotate entity class with the @entity. If you want to give the name of that entity class, right, which is exactly which is nothing but the name of the table, so you can use the @table annotation and give the name, right? Then coming to the different fields, right, we can use @column to give the name of the column. Now, if you see here, this employee ID we had declared as a primary key. If you see here, this employee ID is a primary key. So how we can denote it here? So for that, we can write @ID. Okay, this is also from Jakarta persistence package. So we can write @ID. So it denotes this is a primary key. ID is the primary key here. Okay, and this ID will be generated, right, automatically. So if you see here, right, so we while writing the SQL, while creating this table, we had declared this ID as employee ID is a primary key, and also we gave the auto increment for this employee ID, right? Here ID is @ID indicates the primary key, right? So this ID is ID will be generated automatically, right? So this indicates so how this ID is going to be generated and how it is going to be persisted. For that, we can use @generated value. So if you see this generated value, we can use, we can define the different strategy here. We'll talk about more on this. So strategy equal to generation type, and I'm going to use as identity. Okay. So this indicates the ID value. This ID value means employee ID value will be generated by database and will be managed by database itself. Okay. So this is strategy. That's why we use this strategy. Since while creating the table, we use auto increment, right? So in the entity class, if I want my ID or this employee ID to be generated by database and also managed by database, then we can use the identity. So we have different strategy. Okay, so if we'll talk about the different strategy type, we have if we talk about, we have generation type, you can see dot auto. Okay, what does it means? If I'm using auto, then what type of this strategy, this is a strategy type, okay, of ID generation. So in this case, it will pick an appropriate strategy for the particular database. Okay, so this is your auto. So identity, if I am using identity, then it means this ID generation will be taken care by database and will be managed by database. Okay, then we have other type of generation strategy, that is sequence. Okay, so we have sequence. When we use sequence strategy type, then in that case, it uses the database sequence. Okay. So for that ID, the ID will be generated or ID's value will be generated based on the database sequence. Just remember this. So it will be based on the database sequence. Okay. Then we have another strategy type, that is UUID. So it uses some strategy which is, the strategy of globally unique identifiers. So it is just to ensure the uniqueness. So we can use this strategy as well, right? So if you want to use, globally unique identifiers, that is UUID. Even there is some situation when some of the use cases might not fit in these strategy, right? So in that case also JPA Hibernate provides custom strategy. Okay, so we have custom strategy type. Okay, so in that case, if you want to have your own strategy to generate the ID's value, in that case you need to implement the interface called identifier generator. Okay, so in that case, if you want to have your own custom strategy, so you should write one class. Okay, and you should implement this identifier. So identifier generator, and override the method public serializable generate. So this method you should override, and you should you have to write your own logic here. Okay, so if you want to write your own custom logic to generate the ID's value, right? So in that case, you must implement this interface and must override this method generate. Okay, so this is how we have different strategy, but this is mostly commonly used uh, generation type strategy, that is identity, and which we are using it here as well in our project. So this is your entity class. Okay, so we can just save it, and we can just make sure it's running. So we'll just go and right click and run. Let's see. So if its mapping is correct, then it will there will not be any issue. It will run properly. It will print the hello world. So we are able to create an entity class. Okay, and we'll see how we can perform CRUD operation on that database. Hope this concept is clear. If you like my video, please share it with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe my channel so that you will get the latest update. Also, press the bell icon so that you will get the latest notification. Thank you so much.